Welcome to the first of hopefully a series of informal author interviews that we're going to be doing for the Mississippi County Library System. My name is Tom Henry. Most of you know me. I'm the Programming and Grants Specialist, and I want to stress this is an informal discussion because we're really going to get to know the authors and we're going to get to know their works and hopefully learn a little bit about writing and being an author, because I know there's a lot of people around that have spoken with me about a desire to get their book out. And so one of the things that I'm hoping to discuss is, first of all, the book, and second of all, the craft. And this first one that we're starting out here is going to be an absolutely great one because the author is a local Blytheville native. Now, he's not in Blytheville right now, but his heart, I'm assuming, is. And so I want to welcome Warren Stribling to the chat here. We're on Zoom. If we have problems, just give us some grace because it's the first time. Welcome, Warren. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Tom? It's a pleasure and an honor to be the first of this new series being started.
Well, I have read your newest book most of the way through. I ran out of time because you know how life happens, and I regret that I didn't finish it yet, but I will. And so I think you are a great first author to interview. For those of you that are watching, I'm going to ask Mr. Stribling here to kind of give a little short bio about him and his connections to the Northeast Arkansas area.
All right. So I guess I was born and raised in Blytheville, Arkansas. I went through the Blytheville school system, graduated, from Blytheville High School, 2004. I didn't stick around though. I left right after high school, like maybe a month or two after graduation, and more or less went straight into military service. I did a bit of college here and there in Virginia, which is where I was stationed at. And after about 5 years of being in the Air Force, 6 years, I got out and I actually joined the French Foreign Legion.
Wow.
So I was in the French Foreign Legion for a few years until I was injured in service. And and because I was injured in service, I got to stay in France. I kind of got the right to stay, the residency and all that. And so I stayed in France for a total of 7 years, a few years after I got out of the Legion. And and then after that, I kind of did a bit of traveling around, and eventually I ended up where I am today in Mexico City, Mexico. So
Wow.
I kind of came here doing what I transitioned into from a military life. I started teaching English in France, and I started doing that when I first got here until I finally kind of accepted my role in life of being a writer. So, and that's more or less what I focus on full time now. So
That's great. Absolutely. So you're a Chickasaw.
I'm a Chickasaw.
Okay. You know, whenever I saw your bio and noticed that you was in the French Foreign Legion, of course, that is very exotic to me. You know, you hear of that. So is it in real life the same way that it's portrayed in the old movies and that kind of thing?
Well, to be honest, I've never actually seen in the old movies. I remember they came out with like a video game, and I bought one of the video games for my friends that kind of was like in that same scenario. He said, like, I've heard so much about it, is anything like it? I know there's a movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme. I've actually still never seen it. But I think in general, nothing is ever the way you think it is. Part of the reason I left the Air Force is because, I had this idea of what the U.S. military was like. And it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. And I actually joined the Legion hoping it would be more of what I thought the military should be. And it was and it wasn't. It was more what I thought it would be than, say, the U.S. military is what I thought it would be. But no, I don't think anything is ever what you truly think it's going to be. But maybe if you have some more specific questions about that, I can get on it, like maybe some of the perceptions. But
Right.
Generally speaking, I guess it is. Some things will be what you think it is, but nothing is ever quite the way you think it was or
Right.
should be.
Well, anything I ask you that is too personal, just swat it away. We'll move on. But were you did you join for the purpose of finding adventure or seeing the world, or what was the reason that you joined?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of in that 1% group that's kind of the fly-by-night dreamers is what they call us. Most people that join the Legion, they join for like a second chance in life. So they say it's the only place in the world to get a second chance in life because a lot of people do. They have some sort of criminal background or maybe they're in huge debt. And when I joined, they give you a fake identity. So you can you can adopt that new identity as your real identity should you choose to.
Wow.
say if you are running from something. I would say today that's not so much the case. I know it was the case, when the Legion was first created, and it was definitely the case after World War II. Lots of German soldiers came and joined the Legion, things like that. But no, I would say that a lot of people today, I joined just because, mostly for the adventure. I kind of left home, like I said, at 17. It was probably the scariest thing I've ever done.
I bet.
And then, after being in the military for a few years, I kind of started to find my courage, things like that. And I think I've always kind of had a bit of an adventurous soul, and I just needed the courage to catch up with the adventurous soul, I guess. And after a few years in the U.S. military and traveling and stuff, then I got enough courage to do something even more, a bit crazier, I guess you could say, and join the French Foreign Legion.
All right. Well, the reason we're here is not to necessarily interrogate him, though I find that fascinating. And if we were just one-on-one, it was just me, I'd be asking more questions. But I'm trying not to be too.
Sure.
Too.
No worries.
So we're here to discuss your second book, titled Anger and Hope.
Yes, sir.
And so at the very beginning and at the very end, I'm going to make sure that I give you an opportunity to freely say the book, where a person can get it, when it's available. That so right before I forget, go ahead and do your informing of the people of where they can get your second or first books, and then we'll discuss it because I know they're going to want to get it.
Okay, right on. So when I first started, the first book, I'll say, I just started on just Amazon. It was like an exclusive contract with them. But with Anger and Hope, and soon with Sin and Zen, the first book of the series, it's going to be available on Amazon, of course, but it's also going to be available at Barnes & Nobles, Apple Books. It's going to be pretty much any digital, main store, you're going to be able to get it. As far as like brick and mortar bookstores, that's going to be more or less up to the bookstores themselves if they want to purchase it. I'm not going to promise that, the Barnes & Nobles, in Jonesboro is going to have the copy of the book. But it is available online in digital format. And for the print version, it's available on Amazon.
Okay. So before we start talking about the second book, give me a little bit about the first book. I don't know, you said the first book is called Sin and Zen. Do you have to read that first, or is the second book a standalone?
For me, they're both standalone. The only thing that really stays the same is, well, obviously the main character, but the entire setting is different. The characters are different, and even the theme and the subject matter is different. The only thing that really holds it together is the main character, kind of the tone of the main character, because it's from first person. And the idea, the general theme, because I'm going to try and make it a trilogy, so there will be a third book, is that the general theme would be love. But whereas the first book touches on like eros or romantic love, lust, things like that, the general idea of what people think of when they think of the word love. The second one, Anger and Hope, it has the main character, Will, coming home to Blytheville, Arkansas, and more coming home to the United States after being abroad for so long. And it touches more on like family love or philia. And then the third book, which will be coming out, will kind of wrap it up, and it will talk, it will touch on agape, but it will kind of use, romantic love or eros and philia to kind of build into this sort of, idea of divine love, which will kind of be a full circle of the hero's journey for the main character. Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, I haven't finished it. I did notice a number of themes, such as, I can tell it's going to be redemptive, and I also see that it's a lot of self-awareness in the process of becoming. If you disagree, tell me I've missed it, because like I said, I hadn't finished it. And then, of course, the difficulty that some veterans or whatever have whenever they re-enter. Would you agree with all that?
Yes, definitely. He starts off, in the first book, when I wrote the first book, I wrote it as just something I had to write. It was just, I didn't even plan to publish it. It was just something that had to be written, kind of felt like. I ended up publishing it because that's when I kind of decided I did want to try a stab at this writing career thing. But it was meant to just be a standalone. I've kind of had this dream of writing a different series of books, but people seemed to really enjoy that first book. And it didn't really even have a happy ending. You think that, he might eventually find that, romantic partner he was looking for in the first book, but he really doesn't. And a lot of people said, okay, we got to find out more. What happens to him? Does he finally get married and settle down? Does he, does he find that love? And so I ended up writing a second book, but it turns out that the second one, like I said, is not all about romantic love. He actually hopes to find love through family because he failed in the romantic sense. And this one, especially since it takes place in America, whereas the first one takes place in France and India and Nepal, the second one takes place in America. And being American and having the story take place in America, I did kind of want a happy ending. So it starts off very, yes, he kind of comes with these high hopes, like any sort of hero on a journey sort of thing. And you can see quickly that it doesn't go at all the way he had hoped. And which leads to the anger, and then obviously from the hope. But yes, it does have a redemptive and somewhat happy ending. Not the way you would expect, which is kind of the nice twist to it. But it does have its somewhat happy redemptive ending.
I don't necessarily like my stories to have a perfect bow at the end. So
that's good because it doesn't.
So, you mentioned the first person. One of the things that was striking to me is that the first person narrative voice, it really did, because it makes me feel like you're taking me along that journey intimately and I'm just watching your life. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so why did you choose, is that just a natural way for you to write, or did you strategically think that's the best way to tell the story? Why did you choose that technique?
I chose this technique because, like you said, it's very intimate. Most of it is a character trying to become self-aware. So most of what he's going through, it's important that you see it from his perspective. It's not necessarily the right perspective. Obviously, everybody has their own side of the story, but it's important that you know his side of the story. And also that you kind of are inside of his head, and that you can kind of, because he does a lot of stupid things. He makes a lot of mistakes. And, when we see people make mistakes from the outside, we don't always understand it, or we don't give them the benefit of the doubt. But where if you are inside that person's head and you see the world the way they see the world, you can kind of sympathize or empathize, a bit better with them. And also, I have to say, one of the greatest reasons I wanted to write was, certain authors, and some of my favorite authors wrote from the first person in this very intimate, almost it feels, like a memoir or autobiographical or something like that. And so I really enjoyed those stories like that. And I kind of, I guess, use that as my inspiration to help me get started as a writer.
Gotcha. So let's give the viewers a tease here. Okay. So what NEA settings, places, characters, real life people, anything like that did you use in this, and did it scare you to do so?
I do mention Blytheville, Arkansas. I mentioned Pocahontas, Arkansas, and Jonesboro. I don't talk a lot about it. I do talk about a small town, but that's in the panhandle of Florida in the opening. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about Blytheville. But yeah, I definitely, the first book and the second book do parallel my own life. So, it's more fun. I can call it fiction because, I get to change the parts that I want to change, or, obviously I don't have to exactly remember how something went, right. Things like that. I can just kind of take the nugget of truth or nugget of wisdom from my own personal life and build a story around it. So, there's definitely, it's definitely scary for sure. And a lot of people did read the first book and they were just like, is this your real life? Is this really what happened? Because there are so many things that, right. parallel my own life, Right. So, and I don't want to say that it's a memoir for many reasons. For one, like I said, I like the liberty to be able to change things. Two, it's how well can you actually remember something? They say that after 3 seconds, you've lost the actual memory, and everything else is just your brain recreating what you believed happened, sort of thing. So, I keep a journal. I've always kept a journal. And I do reference it, but not so much for the actual events as much as the emotion in that event. Because we can have an emotional event and then, a half a day later or a week later, we look back and think, well, that was just ridiculous how I reacted that way, or that I felt that way. So for me, it's important that I captured those emotional bubbles in time, and so that way I could kind of recreate them more authentically in the story.
Well, see, you've hit on something a couple of times here that I was going to ask you. I ask all authors, first time, second time, early in their career of writing, I ask them, there's the quote that says that every first novel is autographical for everybody, autobiographical. Okay. And so my question was going to be, how much of these two books has been truly autobiographical? So you kind of hit on that. So did you find the writing of these first two books to be cathartic to you personally then in any way? Or is this just creative?
No, it definitely was. I mean, I had fun writing the main character because, ever since I was a kid, people have always told me, like I'm an old man trapped in a young man's body. And so with the main character, Will, I got to enjoy, to make him more kind of stupid and arrogant and naive and things that, do things that I wouldn't quite do, but it makes him more redemptive when he does find his way, or he does learn his mistakes, things like that. But at the same time, it's obviously a version of myself. It may be exaggerated in some ways, things like that, but it's definitely a version of myself. And so when I got to write it, it really helped me, understand myself better in many ways.
Right.
I've always enjoyed journaling, just writing down my thoughts because, for one, it helps me release the energy, the emotion, whatever, and the thoughts about whatever I'm feeling. But it also, I can reread it and I can actually get perspective on what happened or what I felt. And so actually writing a novel is a really in-depth way to do that. They say if you want to learn about the world outside of you, read a book. If you want to learn about the world inside of you, write a book.
That's a great quote.
And that definitely holds true. So, yeah.
Right. Well, going back to something I asked just a minute ago, I said, were you scared to write about these local places or characters or whatever? Whenever I left the newspaper, I started just writing something because, I've got a lot of stuff to say, but, and then I guess I've come to conclude I can't say them because, how do you do that? And then on top of that, in a small town, even if you make a composite character, it's not so it's a challenge. So I admire you for taking that challenge on. I have some more.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. They say a lot of things that people are afraid of isn't writing the book, it's hitting the publish button. So, yeah. There's always that fear for sure. But I think if you try and filter yourself too much, then, people will read it and they won't feel as connected to it. It won't feel as authentic, So I tried to hold true, without, scaring too many people away. But yeah.
Right. I wanted to go back to something we discussed, but I wanted to bring out a little bit more. The idea in this book of the veteran that's trying to re-enter, okay, particularly coming back home, okay, just moving to another place, it could be from Arkansas to Virginia, or especially if you're, just traveling can do it even, it can changes you because you see more of the world, you meet new things. So tell me a little bit about Will's and or Warren's experience of re-entering, because that was a theme that I think is one that is not necessarily discussed as much as it should be in life.
Okay, yeah. So, well, in the first book, it doesn't talk too much about it. I'm sure if a psychologist was to read the book, he'd be able to come up and say, okay, well, that's obviously some signs of some, struggles, re-entering and, things like that. In the second book, he's a little more aware of it, and maybe not so much aware of it, but he makes the reader more aware of it. He talks a little bit about, things that the book is called Anger and Hope, but there's also another kind of double theme going on, and it's a lot to do with shame and pride. And a lot of people think that they're opposites, shame and pride, but really, as Will discovers, it really kind of comes from the same place, because anything you could be proud of is also something you could be ashamed of. Whether you're talking about gay rights, or you're talking about where you're from, or you're talking about serving in the military. And I think Will goes through a lot of that. He joined, like a lot of good Arkansas boys, with a lot of pride, wanting to serve his country, things like that. And he kind of finds out that it's not what it was. He went to Iraq. I went to Iraq when I was 20. You kind of learned a lot of like the politics and the psychology and things like that about it. And, it kind of starts to relate to all the ideas of it being romanticized, things like that. And, and then you join, and then, at the time, I thought it was just, I didn't like this military service. So I went to go join the French Foreign Legion. And it was much more of like the military, like the way you think of it. But the thing is like you don't realize it at the time, but when you get out, you think like, you're full of confidence, you're kind of a hero in your own mind. And the thing is, you kind of get into the civilian world and you don't know what the hell is going on, especially when you joined at 17, and you get out and you're injured and you're 25 years old. And the only thing you've ever done is, the military. And even though it prepares you in lots of ways, like, for confidence, and even in the Air Force, they give you classes, for how to manage your budget and things like that, you're still not really ready. And in my case, I didn't have a college education, things like that. So you are kind of thrown into the world a bit unprepared, but with the confidence that you can do it anyway. And when you find out you really don't know what you're doing, it hurts your ego just as much as it hurts anything. And, and you kind of just start in a downward spiral. And on the way down, you just keep telling yourself, well, I'm not going to be another cliche. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not struggling with this. And it takes a long time. It probably, you don't realize that it's even happening to you until possibly a few years after you've already gotten out. You just think that, well, life is hard, life sucks, or whatever. And you just kind of sum it up to just generalizations about life rather than saying, well, I'm maybe having a hard time adjusting into the civilian world. And the first book, Will's not even aware of that. It shows by his actions, by what he does, how he lived his life, But in the second book, he becomes much more aware of it, and this strange cocktail of the shame and pride of having served and wondering, was it, is it who I am? Does it define me? And things like that. So I definitely think it's a process. And like you said, maybe it's something that should be touched on more, but not so much in just like a blind, we need to support our troops right. sort of thing. It should really be evaluated, because I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's, it shouldn't be so romanticized and propped up, as the way it is.
Right.
So it should definitely be looked at from two angles.
Well, I know I'm making a sharp turn here, but in my own, whenever you read, you ponder and you apply it to yourself. So some of this process of becoming that I talked about from your book was, the decision of how much are you going to honor what other people's expectations is, or is your, so you have pride in fitting in, you have shame in selling out, perhaps. Okay. And so one of the things, and I hope that's not a too harsh a way of putting it, but sometimes you have to make a decision, am I going to have the career that I want to have, or am I going to have the career I'm expected to have? And so your first person narrative let me into Will's mind, was also getting into my mind about in how many ways do we just submit and then not live? Okay, so I know by your smile, that's one of the goals you probably had in what you was writing, I'm assuming, right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely a thing. And the funny thing is he starts to kind of get like that in the first book, but it's much more in depth again in this one. And it's one of those weird things that, we think we understand something, and we even tell ourselves something, or we read the same memes on Facebook about certain things. One of the big things, like you said, is, do you do what is expected of you? Do what you feel is true to you? And the problem is you kind of go back and forth a lot. And maybe it's not so much back and forth, like I said, but maybe a spiral. You kind of come full circle back to where you was. And I think that, we'll talk about the main character. He kind of understands it in like an intellectual way. He says, and he's always told himself, I'm going to be true to myself. But then even though he understands that that's the right thing to do, at least for him, is to be true to himself and to not let the expectations of family or culture or the world to press down on him and to form him into somebody he's not. He still feels bad when, his family doesn't approve of him, or they don't really give him the encouragement that he expects, or things like that. So even though he knows on one level that he should chase his own dreams and be true to himself, he still feels bad for not feeling good to fit into society. And I think that's, it just shows that there's really, multiple levels to truly understanding something, even just, when it comes to yourself and your place in the world.
Well, I can identify myself in the main character not always, obviously, but enough to make me go, that's realistic.
Well, that's perfect. That's what I'm hoping for.
All right, then. So I'd like to turn a little bit. You wouldn't believe how many people have talked to me about how to write, or they have a book they're trying to write. And of course, we all know, I might have already said it, I don't remember, but, the old quote that everybody has at least one book in them. And the goal is to not die before you get it out, right?
Yeah.
Well, apparently you've already got at least two, and you talked about a third. So you got a third one in the works then, right?
Yeah, I haven't actually started on it yet. I'm kind of waiting for this magic inspiration, I guess, I got the general idea, the theme, but I don't have quite the story yet. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I kind of like to turn the interview into now, is talking about the craft of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have done enough. I'm not published, other than, academic junk, but I know from my tinkering around here that it's hard work, and it also turns in ways you don't expect it to turn. So did you learn a lot about the craft of writing, or about the process of writing, since you've written these two books that you had no idea to begin with?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'm not really, college educated, so I'd never sat in a classroom and learned how to write. I wrote like a short novella for like my senior year project, in high school, and I don't even think it was I don't even think it was the assignment. I think it was supposed to be, like a general paper, but I ended up turning it into like a novella, and my teacher, which was Mrs. Watson, she just absolutely painted it red with grammatical errors. I was absolutely horrible when it came to writing, but she still gave me an A because she loved the story. She loved the creativity of it. And then she ended up, sat with me after school and helped me correct it and things like that. I ended up giving that to my mother as a Mother's Day gift my senior year. But and then I had these dreams of being a superhero in the military, and I spent a few years doing that. I would write bad poetry. I would write a journal, things like that. But never really thought about writing. And then when I got out of the military, I went into teaching English, and that taught me a lot about the English language, especially like grammar and things like that. So it wasn't really until I started teaching English that I actually really learned about English.
Right.
And then also learning other languages, like I speak French, and learning French taught me a lot about English, and it's kind of funny that you realize we say some weird things that we don't know why we say them, when you have to explain these weird idioms or, things like that to people. But the same is absolutely true for writing. I don't know that you can really learn these sorts of things in a classroom. The biggest things would be, the discipline as well, of just sitting down and writing. Everybody has a story in them, like you said, but it's a whole other thing to actually sit down and turn it into a novel.
Absolutely.
And because you get stuck so many times, and then you go through so much self-doubt. And then, like you said, there's the point where you say, people I know were going to read this. They're going to know what's inside my head, or they're going to think this, so it's a very frightening thing. And I think it's, it really, it puts your sense of self, kind of crucifies your sense of self. And it's like, I'm doing this to myself. And I think a lot of people, they don't get to the part of resurrection, where they kind of feel a little bit redeemed, like, hey, I actually did this, I actually finished it. And, I think Stephen King is the one. He said in his memoir called On Writing, he said something along the lines of writing a novel is like paddling across the Atlantic in a bathtub, plenty of room for self-doubt. And that's absolutely true. So I think a lot of it's the discipline to keep pushing through. And then getting over the self-doubt. I think I'm starting to lose track of my thoughts here, but
it's fine. So what you're saying here, my next question here was going to be, at what point did you, and you've answered it, but you said, at what point did you first realize you had a gift of writing, and when did you decide you wanted to write? But you started the interview by saying, I had to put it down. Mm-hmm. And so it's been there all along, and it just had to come out. Now, the perception I have from you, or the impression that I have, is that now you're turning and wanting to do this professionally as opposed to just out of need.
Mhm.
So is your future goals to be a full-time, that's it? Or what does your future hold in your plans, at least with writing?
Definitely, I would love to be a full-time author for sure. At least that's what I want right now. 10 years ago, I wanted to be a soldier. So you never know where life's going to take you. But yeah, definitely right now that would be the dream job. Like I said, I feel like I've tried everything else. I've been a teacher, I've been a soldier, I've even worked jobs like managing, things like that. None of it's really stuck. And none of it's really made sense to me or made me feel I had some sort of meaning or anything. So definitely this has been the closest I've ever gotten to feeling like I have found what I'm meant to do in life. So yeah, I would definitely like to keep at it. I mean, I write a blog because that's much easier to kind of maintain and keep the kind of the steady habit of writing up.
Right.
And I write short stories from time to time, things like that. But definitely being a novelist is definitely a badge of honor that I kind of wear proudly. So, and I would like to continue wearing.
Well, seeing as how this is content for a library, who are your favorite authors, and who got you interested in this? Who would you recommend to our viewers?
Who would I recommend? Well, I think the type of writing that I enjoy may not be for everybody, but I will say that my biggest inspiration would be coming from Charles Bukowski. He's kind of loved, hated by many readers, misunderstood maybe, I don't know. But he's the one that when I read him, it didn't feel like reading. You hear that a lot. But also it was, it's kind of, when you read a book, you think, oh, that's a really great book. And I really connected to the characters. You can have that feeling, but none of them make you feel like you could write your own story. And for me, Bukowski was the guy that did that. He's the one that went one step further and made me feel like, he wrote these things and these ideas. And even though I didn't have the same experiences as him, I felt like he was putting the words out of my head and onto the page. And that was just kind of the magic that made me think, I could do this, so I would have to give the biggest credit to him. His inspiration was John Fontes. So I could, and I've started reading him after that. And I can see that how he was Bukowski's inspiration. One of my other favorites is Albert Camus. It's actually one of the few books, L'Étranger or The Stranger is one of the few books that I've read in French, like in the version original. So, and it was readable even for me at my level of French, which shows that he just writes in a very approachable way, kind of for the layman, but with very deep philosophical ideas, which could possibly be overlooked by most people, but they're still under there. And that kind of inspires me to write as well.
I've been involved in helping edit a few books. Mm-hmm. And I think you hit on something that I would say is, I wish people would learn. You don't have to try to over-impress with, some kind of, don't talk above your level. That is to, and don't say it in 100 words if you can say it in 15,
Yeah.
And so, the challenge, I think, to some people is they feel maybe they're not skilled enough, but you can get help on the skill. But, so anyway, so I'm trying to make this about you, and I keep giving my 2 cents.
No, it's good. It's good. It's absolutely correct.
So what advice would you give to someone that has never written a book, or someone, especially someone young, a new author that's thinking about, hey, I'd like to write a book? What advice would you give them?
I suppose I would write, but I wouldn't write with the idea of people are going to read this. Maybe write it like you're writing it to your favorite aunt. Maybe you're writing it like you're writing to God, or just, the open sky, but just write it just because you want to write it. Like you said, you can always come back and edit it. If you don't want to reveal this part about yourself, you can edit that part out if you want. I think you'll find that you don't want to edit that part out about yourself, or you maybe want to expand on it or whatever. But I would definitely say, get past the fear of it first, kind of like learning to swim. Just jump in and just do it. And then, like you said, people, you can come back and kind of edit it. So the first step would be, yes, getting over the fear of writing. getting over the fear of what other people might think. You're going to be a writer, so you're going to be lonely. Just get used to the idea. So, but yeah.
Do you have a specific time of day or a specific place that you do all your writing, or are you kind of free to do whenever?
Well, the first book I pretty much wrote in the middle of the night. I was working at the time and full time, obviously. And so I would just kind of come home around 7 or 8 in the evening. And, I'd start pouring myself some glasses of wine, and I would just hack away at the computer until 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I would say my magic at that point, it got to the point where I could, almost feel it coming between 10 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning, on a regular basis, once I got the discipline of sitting down every night to do it. Now that I've kind of taken this on full time, I'll still teach classes from time to time, but I'm kind of just, I'm my own, worker now. So, I pretty much kind of dedicate from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon as my magic hours. Sometimes I'll, definitely when I was writing Anger and Hope, I pretty much wrote the entire book in 1 month. And, and some days I wrote 7,000 words in one day. Obviously that was a very, very good day. Yeah. But, and yeah, those days, I sat in front of the computer for like 10 hours. So it doesn't have to be in that time, but you do notice, it's weird, but you do start to notice that there is like some sort of magic time where all the best stuff comes out, or, where you feel most productive, things like that. So for me, that's from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would have to say now.
Okay. I was going to jokingly say, as you drank more wine, did it get better?
Yeah, as well as Hemingway that said, write drunk, edit sober. So that was definitely how the first one was written. The first one was written that way.
All right. All right. So here's the big controversy, do you outline in advance, or do you learn as you go what the characters are going to do?
For this first series, the Sin and Zen series, I'm definitely just going as I go. I didn't really, because it parallels my own life. I guess, I have a sort of outline just because I can always just say, if I get stuck, if like the creativity runs out, I'll be like, oh, well, what happened in my real life at this point? And then I can use that as kind of like a key to hop back into the story. So I didn't really have an outline. No, definitely nothing drawn out. And I'm not very, if you look at my life and how I live my life, I'm not very good with structure and authority, even if it's my authority to myself. So yeah, I definitely didn't do that. I'm actually trying to write this dystopian future sort of book. And with that one, I'm kind of doing a little more outlining, but it's not so much outlining as it is just trying to build a world. And so that one's probably a little more structured, but definitely these first 2 books have been just, rolling with it. And some of my favorite parts of the story have come from that, because it just kind of, I come up with this character that I never even had thought of, and this character comes out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, that will give, some good character development for Will, if I introduce this character, or it'll connect him to his past, or something like that, and show how he's evolved more. So some of my best stuff has just come literally off the cuff.
Personally, outline, I have to have an outline, but it also trips me up every time. So you mentioned characters, building characters. Tell me your approach, any advice or whatever, on how do you create your characters and names, especially if you're talking about someone, I don't want to give the impression that you're getting kind of juicy gossip on anybody local, but because I hadn't, but you have to be mindful not to make it look like it's someone if it is. So how do you build characters? How do you come up with names? Those kind of things.
Well, I suppose I don't put too much thought into it. That's probably not the best advice to give, but like for example, Will's name, his name is Will Strife. So the Strife comes from, obviously it kind of comes a little bit from my own last name, and my own last name is sort of some sort of German background, I think. So I wanted something that sounded German, but also I enjoyed puns, as silly as it sounds. So the idea of it being Strife, like, he's a character constantly in strife, I think that really applied. And then so after that, so when I started writing the second one where it introduces his family, the first one doesn't talk much about his family, but the second one, it's about family. And so he introduces his family. I try to give similar German names. So that's about as far as the thought I put into it, really. Is just kind of names that, that sounded German, and then also names that could be easily turned into like little pet names for each other, because, it's about a brother. And so what would be a good name you could easily turn into a pet name that one brother would give to another, things like that.
Right.
And so, yeah, that was as much thought I really put into that part. But as far as names go.
You was talking about looking for your next book, your third book, not the one that's coming, but the one that you're still thinking about, that you hadn't got all of the plot inspirations. Okay, so that begs the question, where do you find your inspirations?
Definitely real life. I think one of the most important things for a writer isn't so much, obviously grammar. You want people to be able to understand you. And if you don't have at least decent grammar, nobody's going to be able to understand you, or they're going to misunderstand you. But definitely one of the other things is you have to live, you have to have something to write about. I think you could write many great books, probably, maybe not great, but good books anyway, we'll say. If you've just read lots of good books and you can kind of imitate what you've read. But I think to really write great books, I think you have to have had your own life experiences. And this first book that I wrote was, very much inspired by my own experiences. And so I think this whole trilogy is going to kind of stay on that. It's going to be more or less inspired by that. I suppose what I'm stuck on now with this third book for the inspiration is I have enough to make a book, but I don't think that it's, I don't know that it's what I want it to be about. I'm still not sure if I want it to be a happy ending, if I want it to be a realistic ending. And also I don't know that I have just quite the right inspiration for it yet. And so I'm still waiting to see what happens. We'll see what happens, but yeah. Okay.
Do you now or at any time in the past have a mentor, a writing mentor? Is that something that you strongly recommend, or?
I would have loved to have had a mentor. I've definitely had mentors in my life, but never about writing. I have to say most of my inspirations just come from reading, whether it's, Stephen King saying, kill your darlings, like by cutting out all the adverbs when you go through the editing process, or, whether it's Bukowski, who has on his headstone, don't try, which for me is one of the greatest pieces of advice. And I'm somewhat Taoist in philosophy. I definitely believe in the doing, not doing, don't try and force anything, allow it to happen of itself. A tennis player that makes the perfect backhand, he wasn't thinking about the technique when he made the perfect backhand. It happened because he became the sport, or a dancer becoming the dance. I try and, let the writing do itself, as many writers say, but you don't quite understand it unless you've, made the perfect swing at bat, and hit a home run. You couldn't explain how you did it. It happened kind of itself.
Right.
And I would say that would be a piece of advice, but also the greatest piece of advice I got from my inspiration as a writer.
Okay. What do you hope that your readers walk away with when they complete reading your books?
I suppose just looking at life a bit differently. I mean, I'm very philosophical myself, and I think, Socrates, just getting people to look at their lives, analyze their lives. I would like to do the same thing. If people could just stop and think, question, their life a little bit, not in a question like, I'm doing the wrong thing, but just question like, is this what I want to be doing? Is this how I really feel about this? Just maybe step outside of themselves for just a moment, or, maybe the length of the story, and ask, look at themselves and, and their life and the world around them.
Okay. I'm going to give you an open end to discuss anything that might be on your heart, or something that I should have asked, didn't think to. Make sure that you also remind everyone the name of the book, how they can get it, when they can get it. And then, so I give it to you for a moment. So go ahead.
All right. I think we've covered things pretty well. I'd have to say, I kind of give this general life advice. I wrote this article about how to join the French Foreign Legion and what to expect. And I kind of came up with this thing that I tell guys that always email me asking me for advice on how to do it. And now I kind of transition this into giving advice for writing. But I would just say general life advice would be to trust your gut, follow your gut, trust your heart, use your brain. We always talk about there being this battle between the heart and the brain. And, a lot of people say that the brain is the right way to go. Some people say trust your heart. But I would say before that, follow your gut. Your gut, it's your instinct. It's your Tao, if you want to call it that. It'll point you in the right direction. It won't explain to you how to do it, but it will point you in the right direction. You may not know why you need to go that direction, but just follow your gut. And that will lead you to where you need to be. The second part would be trust your heart. So maybe don't listen to it in the sense of as you should your brain, but trust it as in it will tell you who you can trust, things like that as you go through life. And then use your brain. A lot of people think their brain is who they are, but I think the brain is just a tool. It's the most powerful tool in the universe, but it's still just a tool. And it's meant to make whatever your gut tells you to do, it's meant to make that happen. It's not supposed to tell you what to do. It's just supposed to make what, you tell it to do happen. It's actually kind of funny. I used to jump out of planes for the French Foreign Legion. And I like to use that a lot in life now is, when I jumped out of a plane, I didn't really know how to do it. You just kind of fall out and you figure it out on the way down. And that's kind of the way I kind of look at life now is, you just jump and you'll figure out, you'll figure it out on the way down. So I would say that would be some general life advice. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else to add. I'll go ahead and say that the book, Anger and Hope, is going to be released on July 24th. So just a couple weeks away now. So grab a copy. And like I said, it's available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes & Noble, all that good stuff. And if you want a paperback copy, then definitely that will be on Amazon. And if you want a signed copy, I'd be more than happy to do that. It's kind of a per case basis at the moment. So just send me an email. My email is write@wstribling.com. I also have a website, wstribling.com. Send me a message and I'll make sure and get you a signed copy.
So that website you just announced, that's your blog, right?
It's a blog. I also write for Medium, because Medium actually kind of pays me for the articles that I write. So I write everything I post. I usually post on Medium as well. But yes, everything I post on Medium, I also post on my own website. Besides, like the Legion articles, because it doesn't stay with the theme of my website. But yep.
And the first book is still available too, right?
Yes, the first book is still available. It's titled Sin and Zen.
Right.
And it was published. July 24th is actually the 1-year anniversary of Sin and Zen. So I've set it as a pre-order to be released exactly 1 year after Sin and Zen.
All right, then. Well, I want to thank you for taking time to let me visit with you and answer these questions. I have enjoyed it. If no one else does, I have. Okay?
That's good. I have too.